Dana Greeley was dedicated to peace and justice as a way of life, a conscientious objector during World War II, and founder of the World Conference on Religion and Peace. Later, he opposed American armed intervention in Vietnam. Reverend Greeley was also a strong supporter of the civil rights movement. He marched with Dr. Martin Luther King in Selma, and he participated actively in ecumenical, interfaith, and service organizations. The Greeley Foundation Statement of Purpose reflects Reverend Greeley's commitments to promote dialogue and leadership, to elevate integrity, compassion, honesty, and courage, and to seek creative ways to realize strong, joyous, vital, and unifying power of peace. The annual Greeley Lecture and the Greeley International Internship embody these ideals. Not all of the members of the Greeley Foundation Board, which gifted the Greeley Endowment to the Divinity School, as well as several other institutions, could be here this afternoon. However, I would like to thank those present and those absent. I would like to thank all of them for this generous gift. The board members at the time the gift was given to the Divinity School were Ned Perry, Catherine Angel, Nancy James, Eric Von Loon, Faith Greeley Scoville, C.C. King, Joan Ross, Denise Moorhead, Robert Rosenbaum, Rainer Boyks, Karen Wheeler, John Whitney, and the late Robert Wisselhoft. I believe also that former board members Kathy Retker and Paul Marion are also here this afternoon, and if there are others of you that I've not named, I hope you will introduce yourself to me at the reception following the lecture. So I would appreciate it if those of you who are in the audience from the Greeley, who have been associated with the Greeley Foundation, if you would please raise your hands and we could give you a round of applause. The Dana Greeley International Internship funds one HDS student for a summer's work outside the United States with an organization dedicated to promoting interreligious understanding, peace, and social justice. The first two recipients of the Greeley Internship are, I believe, in the audience. During the summer of 2008, Stephanie Amorosa, MDiv class of 09, received the first Greeley International Internship. She worked with the Henry Martyn Institute, the International Center for Research, Interfaith Relations and Reconciliation in Hyderabad, India, as well as finding field placements for postgraduate scholars of conflict resolution. She taught English in community-based projects and participated in organizing workshops on conflict transformation. Stephanie, are you here? Yes. Let's have a round of applause for Stephanie. Charles Karsten, MTS class of 2010, is the second Greeley International recipient. This summer he will work with the Institute for Religion, Culture, and Peace at Payap University in Chiang Mai, Thailand. The Institute's mission is to foster increased mutual appreciation and cooperation among the world's religious communities and to contribute to peace building and reconciliation efforts in Thailand and throughout the world. The Institute also serves as a center for research into religion and culture in Thailand and Southeast Asia. So Charlie is here. Would you please raise your hand? This afternoon's inaugural Greeley Lectureship, dedicated to the ideals of peace and social justice, will be delivered by Professor Tomas Halik, who will be introduced by Professor Ron Thiemann. And I want to thank Ron particularly for recommending for Professor Halik to us. Professor Thiemann is the Bussey Professor of Theology here at Harvard Divinity School. He's been here since 1986. He served as Dean of the Divinity School from 1986 to 98 and is a member of the CSWR Advisory Board. Among his several books are Doing Theology in Public, Essays Theoretical and Practical, and Religion and Public Life, A Dilemma for Democracy. We're looking forward to his forthcoming book, Prisoners of Conscience, Public Intellectuals at a Time of Crisis, and it was while doing research for this project that Professor Thiemann made the acquaintance of Father Halik. After Professor Halik speaks, there will be some time for questions, and then followed by a reception just out here in Andover lobby. So, Professor Thiemann.
It's a great pleasure for me to introduce my friend and colleague, Monsignor Professor Tomas Halik, Professor of Sociology at Charles University in Prague and Rector of the University Church of the Holy Savior. Professor Halik is one of the Czech Republic's leading public intellectuals, having published widely in both academic and popular journals, and greatly in demand as a preacher, speaker, and radio and TV commentator. Like many religious leaders of his generation, he was forced to practice his vocation in secrecy under the repressive post-1968 communist regime in Czechoslovakia. He earned his doctorate in philosophy from Charles University in 1972 and studied theology clandestinely before being secretly ordained in Eastern Germany in 1978. During the communist period, he was banned from university teaching and was registered and investigated by the secret police as an enemy of the regime. Prior to the 1989 revolution, he was active in the underground church, and in the 1980s was one of Cardinal Tomášek's closest associates. He was the initiator of the ecumenical pastoral project Decade of National Spiritual Renewal, and was actively involved in clandestine seminars in private houses, published in Samistat, and helped to publish illegal philosophical and theological books and journals. He also cooperated with the future president, Václav Havel, and other dissidents. Professor Halik has over 200 publications to his credit, including full-length books, teaching texts, and articles for both specialists and general readers. His books have been published in German, Polish, Italian, Spanish, Ukrainian, and Slovenian. His newest book, which I have here, Patience with God, has just been published in English, and so this is a moment also to introduce his work to an English-speaking audience by Doubleday, New York. And a further book, Confessor's Night, will appear from the same publisher, Doubleday, in October of 2010. He has lectured widely throughout Europe, as well as in India, in India, the United States, and Latin America. He has had visiting professorships at Salzburg University, Calvin College, and both Oxford and Cambridge universities. Since the mid-90s, he has been involved in international efforts to promote dialogue and understanding between religions and cultures, taking part in talks with Jewish thinkers in Israel and the United States, with Hindus in India and Great Britain, with Buddhists in Nepal, Japan, and Thailand, and with Muslims in Egypt, Jordan, and Great Britain. In addition to all these remarkable professional accomplishments, Tomas Halik is a gracious and generous human being, a terrific conversationalist, and a true religious cosmopolitan. I've had the pleasure of his company both in Prague and here in Cambridge, and we share many common spiritual, philosophical, and theological convictions. As a lifelong Czech citizen, he is a connoisseur of the Czech national beverage, beer, and has introduced me to the best microbreweries in all of Prague. Tomas, I'm delighted to welcome you to Harvard, and we look forward to your lecture, Negative Eschatology and Interfaith Dialogue.
Ladies and gentlemen, thank you for inviting me. Thank you for this kind introduction. Thank you for coming. I suppose that after such a hot day, everybody must be tired and sleepy. And I remember when my friend, the chief rabbi of the Westminster Synagogue in London, told me once that he mentioned that during his preaching, the president of the community, of the congregation, is sleeping. And he asked him, Max, why do you sleep always when I'm preaching? And he said, I trust you, Rabbi. So... if anyone would sleep during my lecture, I promise I will interpret it in a positive way as a sign of a deep trust in my person and in my teaching. Anyway, I will try to keep you attention. Ladies and gentlemen, when tensions in our world is too great, and when frustrations and fear attains high level among people and among entire groups of people, ordinary everyday language and the language of secular politics is not powerful enough to express those emotions. People spontaneously reach for language of religion. Political leaders, even in the so-called secular societies, which have scrupulously striven to separate religion and politics, use the power of religious rhetoric and religious symbols. Once again, the world is bedeviled and people are dehumanized. Political enemies are no longer perceived simply as people with different opinions and interests, but as the army of the great Satan. If religion becomes a weapon in political conflicts, it can truly have destructive powers. Nuclear weapons turn human settlements into dust and ruins. Religion, when used as a weapon, transforms the landscape of political conflicts into a battle scene in an apocalyptic cosmic war between good and evil. For many societies, it is natural to perceive the world in religious terms. Our Western and particularly European civilization, which underestimated the strength and vitality of religion over previous 2 centuries, has been caught off guard. Many are disconcerted when even political leaders of the democratic world borrow the language of those who propagate holy wars. However, long ago, Carl Schmitt asserted that all significant concepts of the modern theory of the state are secularized theological concepts. In the West, religion and theology is a forgotten and often deliberately displaced dimension of politics that is unconscious and profound. Sometimes precisely where people take for granted that God is dead, it is surprising how easy and quickly the old gods and demons of our culture's collective unconsciousness can be revived. Nowadays, in the West, the new atheism and militant secularism are not content to underestimate and ignore the importance of religion, as had been the trend of post-Enlightenment naivety hitherto. Now, in many places, they are attacking religion and seeking, without the capacity to differentiate, to reject, caricature, and demonize all religion, the religion of those others, particularly Islam, and also the religious roots of their own civilization, particularly Christianity. However, such trends provoke and arouse those truly dangerous aspects of religious traditions and communities, fundamentalism and fanaticism. The alternative is a honorable dialogue between religions, or between believers belonging to various religious communities and within them, and between religious believers and those who believe in secular humanism. I will seek in this lecture to draw attention to one element of Christian theology, which, were it to be appreciately developed, could help overcome the main barrier, internal inhibition to this dialogue, and could be of major assistance to Christian theology in that dialogue. I'm convinced that it can help and become an important stimulus for creating a climate of dialogue in our world. I even dare to hope that the idea of the negative eschatology, about which I will talk today, could provide inspiration not only for Christian theology, but also for theologies of the other religions of the Abrahamic tradition, Judaism and Islam. One of the basic prerequisites for interreligious dialogue is finding a suitable language. It's not an easy task if secularization, a term once sacrosanct for several generations of scholars who studied religion, but now mostly rejected, still means anything at all, then it is the crisis of religious language. Permit me to paraphrase St. Paul. If I spoke in the tongue of mortals and angels, but I had not love, I would be nothing. For many of our contemporaries, traditional religious language is an esoteric tongue of angels that few understand. If Christians wish to address believers of other faiths, including those that profess secular humanism, they ought to translate their message into the language of love. By that I don't mean sweetly sentimental talk of love, but a form of communication that would have the attributes that St. Paul ascribes to love. Love is patient, love is kind, love is non-envious or boastful or arrogant or rude. It does not insist in its own way. It is not irritable or resentful. It does not rejoice in wrongdoing, but rejoices in the truth. It bears all things, believes all things, hopes all things, endures all things. People are capable of mature love when they are no longer prey to naive infantile illusions about their own omnipotence. Love is patient. It is not boastful. It knows that all our knowledge, and our religious knowledge in particular, is only partial, that now we see in a mirror dimly. It is mature insofar as it is capable of waiting for the moment when we shall know fully, even though it knows that in this world, in this time, in hoc saeculo, we won't attain the full knowledge of truth. It will endure, remaining in this sacred uncertainty. It will endure and withstand temptations from right and left, of many radical secularists and of religious triumphalists who suppose both that they already dispose of that complete knowledge of the truth, or that they will acquire it within the framework of this world and by means available to them in this world. If Christian theology is to become a competent instrument for dialogue with others, it must inject into our understanding of the Church, of truth, and of the Word a radical openness, a sense of eschatological differentiation between what is available to us now and what is the object of our eschatological hope. What would seem to be the Christian's greatest obstacle to dialogue with others is triumphalism, which conceals both a theological error and a psychological problem: self-fascination, immature narcissism. Christian tradition distinguishes three forms of the Church. Firstly, there is the Ecclesia Militans, the fighting Church, Christians in this world. Secondly, the Ecclesia Patiens, the suffering Church, the souls in purgatory. And thirdly, the Ecclesia Triumphans, the Church triumphant, the saints in heaven, it seems the eschatological dimension of the Church. Whenever Christians forget the need for eschatological differentiation between the Church triumphant in absolute future and the Church militant here and now, they start to regard themselves as a perfect society, societas perfecta, already possessing the knowledge of the entire truth. Then Christian triumphalism comes into being with all its tragic consequences. The struggle of ecclesia militants originally meant a struggle with one's own temptation and sins, including the temptation of triumphalism. If the Church forgets the need for patient and humble openness vis-à-vis its eschatological future, it gives rise to militant religion and militant church battling against those others, those who are different, who hold different beliefs, whether in the external world or in the Church's own ranks. There is a striking resemblance here to the Islamic concept of jihad. Here too, the original concept of moral struggle with one's own failings becomes in certain circumstances a program of holy war against infidels. Religious triumphalism is a form of group narcissism and an illness of faith. It is one of the main obstacles to dialogue and the mutual beneficial coexistence of people of different religions in a world in rapid coalescence. The term societas perfecta was used by the medieval church to describe itself during the process papal emancipation in the face of the threat of imperial hegemony. In the investiture struggle, that papal revolution that had been referred to as the First European Revolution, and which make a major contribution to the pluralization of the West, and hence to the history of freedom. This term, however, in common with the whole lot of other terms, including the war on terror or culture war, runs an inherent risk of being taken literally. It means wrongly, and then it becomes dangerous. We have said that Christian triumphalism occurs when the worldly form of the church, ecclesia militans, is confused with the ecclesia triumphans of the eschatological future. Triumphalism is actually a secularization of the church's eschatological vision. An incapacity for eschatological differentiation gives rise to militant and intolerant religion. Often it is the expression of an unacknowledged loss of confidence in an eschatological future as such. Jesus' reference to an eschatological horizon is an invitation to patience and tolerance. Those who are able to wait for the time of harvest will not pull up the wheat with the tares in foolish endeavor to purify God's field. Jesus warned his disciples against anticipating the eschatological task of the angels. Any attempt at playing the role of the angels at the last judgment and waiting to divide one's neighbors into good and bad turns people into angels of darkness. The zealotry of revolutionaries, inquisitors, and religious terrorists is a sin against all three divine virtues hope, faith, and love. Something of the kind occurs in the lives of religious communities and the lives of individual believers. When believers lose the ability to endure patiently their own doubts, stemming from the fact that here we know only in part, they start to project their shadow, their doubts, their lack of faith onto the others. And only there are they able to contend with them. Intolerant, militant believers are often seeking simply to escape their own doubts and their own unbelief by shifting the battle with them out of their own minds and hearts to somewhere else. When they are unable to make friends of their doubts and turn their own doubts into a partner in dialogue, they create enemies of those others. When they are incapable of coming to terms with the fact that here we see only as in a mirror, others who are different become a mirror of their own inability to learn, of their own ignorance, of their own unconsciousness. That's why they are so irritating. In fact, though others, those who are different from us, can be useful mirror for us, in which we may recognize that we are generally unable or unwilling to see. When we start to be capable of seeing in those who provoke us on account of their difference, our own shadows, the things that we deny and displace and yet are part of us, we can say to ourselves, that's me too. In this way, can contribute towards peace with others and a better understanding of ourselves. In place of naive, immature, narcissistic notion about ourselves, we can come to a better understanding of our own identity. None of us has seen our own face. All we see is its reflection in the mirror. We need others in order to discover and recognize our own identity. Meeting others is a unique opportunity for us. If we are incapable of looking into the mirror they set up for us, with patience and the courage of love, which endures all things, and instead we yield to the temptation to break that mirror, we are condemning ourselves to blindness. Then we cannot recognize even the truth in a glass darkly. If anyone thinks they can recognize the truth without dialogue with others, they have lost the key, and with it, most likely, the chance of one day having the mystery of their own identity revealed to them. The face of the other is the place where the face of God is most likely to be revealed to us, Emmanuel Levinas taught. We can squander the opportunity to meet with the other and thus with God, not only by rejecting the other, but also when we fail to acknowledge and respect their differences, their otherness, when, with arrogant impatience or with the naive of goodwill, we seek to blur the differences, homogenize the other, to make what is foreign our own. The other must never cease to be for us a riddle, a mystery. Understanding the other does not mean to have done with them. On the contrary, si comprehendis non est Deus. You can be sure that whatever you have understood is not God, St. Augustine maintained. If we want to meet God, whom we can only recognize in a mirror and only dimly in the world and in the others, then the world and those others must become a mirror and a riddle, an unfathomable mystery for us. Living with others is an invitation to permanent dialogue and process of deeper and deeper understanding which has no end in this life. Polite tolerance and relativistic assertion that everyone is right in his way can also conceal indifference towards others and their truth. If we believe in one God, the truth of the other cannot be separated from my truth by impenetrable wall. If we believe in a God that is not at our disposal in this world, but is the mystery of the eschatological future of all of us, then our truths, albei different, need not be weapons of conflict, but instead a mutually beneficial reminder that we and those others are still journeying on the road and have not reached our destination, that there is still much that we still lack, and we can learn much from each other. Understanding ourselves and understanding others must remain an open issue, in the same way that our understanding of God, or it is not real understanding otherwise. If we acknowledge that God is truth, it means that full understanding of truth is an eschatological task. The truth is a book that none of us has yet read to the end. When an atheist says there is no God, I have a wish to add to this assertion and elaborate: he is not here yet. He is not here in his entirety. The God of the Bible is he who is to come. God, according to the Bible, is our future. Here and now, in our world, in our lives, in our being here, Dasein, he is present above all in the act of our faith, our hope, our longing, and our intention. According to Christian teaching, he himself is present in that act as a gift. Faith is grace. Even though our act of faith does not cease to be equally an act of human freedom, of human courage to believe and hope, of human responsibility, the capacity to respond to the gift of grace, long for it, and be open to it. The eye with which I see God is the same eye with which God sees me, Master Eckhart maintained. In our presence, in our world, the human and divine encounter each other in faith, love, and hope, here and now. What started in the past, the act of creation and redemption, and what is to come, the culmination of the process of creatio continua and redemptio continua, in the terminology of Teilhard de Chardin, the Christification of the cosmos, comes into play. By our faith, we anticipate the situation when God will be everything in everyone, by passing from what is toward what is not yet, but could be, even if it is often seem impossible to us. I agree with Richard Kearney that at the crossroads, where only two paths seem possible, two assertions, God exists and there is no God, we can interpret important biblical texts as a third possibility. God may be. God comes to us as a possibility, as an invitation, as a challenge. I will be with you if you step into the future that I open up to you, to which I invite you, which I promise you, to which I empower you. God in this context is the one who opens up our present, our world, our being to the future. He is at one at the same time that future and the one who opens us to that future. He is the openness of what is toward which is not yet. Light streams in through this openness, and in it we can see what is here, our world, our present, our history, our lives, in a manner quite different than if we lived in a closed life, if we lived only from our past and our present. Faith, as defined by Thomas Aquinas, means assentire non apparentibus, adhering to what one doesn't see. We cannot see God just as we cannot see the future. And just as we cannot see the light itself, but in the light of faith, ray from the future, we see the world in a certain way, and we are able to find our way about it. He who knows about depth knows about God. Paul Tillich asserted, perhaps in this building. I would like to add to that, those who understand the world and life as something open toward the mystery of what is to come, can understand what the Bible means by the word faith. Then they are already standing in the faith, and with their open hearts, pure hearts, they understand what Christian faith opens up toward, what is directed toward what Jesus calls the coming kingdom of God, God Himself. Jesus blessed those with pure hearts, for they shall see God, future tense. The God who comes out of His future, out of Himself, from the hiddenness of light inaccessible, and comes to us, remaining in our presence discreetly as a light that does not show itself, but shows the world. Preserving faith means making sure all the time that our openness toward the future is not occluded by projections from our past and present, so that the purity of our hope is not sullied by illusions and fantasies that are the product of our memories, wishes, and anxieties. In such an unadorned faith, a faith without images, something that was already demanded by Master Eckhart, actually possible? Is it at all possible to preserve our attitude to the future free of the shadows of our past and present? Is it possible to put our experience into parentheses and rely on the words of Revelation, "See, I'm making all things new"? Is it possible to approach a spring of a new wine without the old wine skins? That is the task of what I call negative eschatology. For centuries, negative apophatic theology has maintained that the only thing we can say about God is what He is not. Whatever we say about God is exposed and deconstructed as images, which are always inadequate by the very nature of the thing, as metaphors, analogies, symbols, and signs. In like manner, the job of negative eschatology is constantly to expose the notions that we create about its coming and is it to come in our notions, our imperfect human notions, which tend to obstruct rather than assist our openness to mystery. After Feuerbach, Nietzsche, and Freud, it is not difficult to expose many of these notions as human, all too human projections of our wishes and anxieties, our illusions, ressentiment, and alibism. The hereafter, as the backstage of history, has been rejected as fictitious and harmful instrument of attempts to belittle this world as a specter or even the opium of cheap reassurance, undermining the loyalty to the earth, to the world. But it was humanity's historical experience in the 20th century that did more than intellectual criticism to undermine the credibility of Christian eschatological notions. Compared to the horrors of the two world wars, totalitarian regimes, and particularly the communist and Nazi concentration camps, Holocaust, our traditional notions of hell seem comical. On the other hand, the fantastic scope for a pleasant, interesting, and entertaining lifestyle that the 20th century science, technology, and economics offered people outshone and put in the shade everything that a pious imagination expected from heaven. The fairy tale world of luxury that was available to some directly and to others vicariously through films and TV serials appeared more fun than endless concerts of angels in heaven. It would seem that this world, seculum, has assimilated both heaven and hell. Man now has sufficient knowledge of good and evil, and the only thing that his life on earth now lacks is the dimension of eternity. The excitement aroused by the proposal to clone human beings was probably due to the expectation that humanity will at last gain control of the last remaining privilege of the hereafter, life without end. The human imagination has long since capitulated to the category of eternity and quietly substitute for it the notion of infinite temporal duration. However, those who already experience tedium and disgust due to being sated, those who, horrified by their own emptiness, have become dependent on drugs of every variety, and above all the drugs of the cheap entertainment industry, often do no long any more for a life without end. They find It's hard to imagine an opiate powerful enough to conquer boredom for eternity. The notions which the imagination of artists, the rhetoric of preachers, and the creative fantasy of human piety peopled for centuries that the open space of mystery of last things have lost their motivational force. The yearning and fears rooted deep in human hearts have found other objects. Eric Fegerin used to talk about immanentization, the eschaton. In the place of pale Christian eschatology, many secular eschatologies have appeared on the scene, from naive Enlightenment belief in heaven on earth, which will automatically be brought about by science and technical progress, to totalitarian regimes that likewise promised heaven on earth, but which gradually transformed the earth into hell. If people in a society of abundance try to quench their thirst for the absolute through values constantly proffered them by the sirens of advertising industry, they find themselves in a vicious circle of stress and frustration. However, the Christian message is unthinkable without its eschatological dimension. The kingdom of heaven that was central to Jesus' preaching is a kingdom that is coming. It is not of this world, but nevertheless it is in this world. The community of Jesus' disciples, which regards itself as avant-garde of that coming kingdom, is intended to serve as a contrast and critical corrective vis-à-vis the practices of domination in this world. Whoever wants to be first must be last of all and servant of all. Christ, the Lord of that kingdom, is represented chiefly in this world by the poor and suffering. Only beyond the horizon of time does he reveal his identity, just as you did it to one of the least, and these who are members of my family, you did it to me. If I understand correctly, the eschatological chapter of Matthew's Gospel, then the parousia, the Christ's second coming, has already begun. Jesus is present anonymously in the sick, in the powerless, in the persecuted, and the poor. According to Matthew's Gospel, the last judgment will be a dramatic happening during which Christ will unmask his multitude incognitos and thereby cause a shock for the just and unjust alike, for both failed to recognize him among his deputies on earth. No one comes to the Father except through me, Jesus says, and the Christian exclusivists like to cite this statement as an argument against excessive indulgence for non-Christians. But who is the me in that statement of Jesus? In this connection, Richard Kearney speaks about Christ's presence in the poor and persecuted. Whoever demonstrates solidarity with one of the least comes to the Father through Christ, who is present within them anonymously. The rest, however, will not pass through the gate. However, eagerly they appeal to him and say to him, Lord, Lord. The expectation of Christ's early arrival and probably the reason for his real presence in the breadth of poverty has went since the time that Christianity was established in the Roman Empire. Eschatology sees it to be hope in a new heaven and new earth, which was formerly a critical barb vis-à-vis the status quo on earth. And it was privatized and turned into a concern that the souls of Christians should enter heaven after death. What had been at the heart of the Christian kerygma gradually became an appendix to textbooks of dogmatics, a final tract of last things. The flame of eschatological euphoria survived in a certain form among those men and women who, from the 4th century onward, constructed an alternative model to imperial Christianity, the desert communities that gave rise to the monasteries and monastic orders. The monastic vows of poverty, chastity, and obedience are eschatological in character. That is also why the flame of revolutionary enthusiasm often originated from monasteries. Chiliasm, in particular, was often a seedbed of political disorder. The origins of the social utopias that inspired early socialism owes much to the monk Tommaso Campanella and St. Thomas More, whose vision of a utopian state was also inspired by his experience of the Benedictine order, which he initially wanted to join. An interesting transformation of eschatology, however, were the doctrines of Joachim of Fiore concerning 3 phases of history, corresponding to the persons of the Holy Trinity, Father, Son, and Spirit. The archetype of 3 historical ages and idea of a new age about to come into being runs through the entire history of Western political thoughts. We encounter this theme in the Middle Ages, both in the early days of the Franciscan movement and the Hussite movement in Bohemia, and in the modern era it is particularly evident in the writing of Comte, Hegel, and Marx. Moreover, Carl Gustav Jung's vision of Aquarian Age and the New Age movements recall in some way the proclamation of the Age of the Spirit. Many ecclesiastical and social reformers, as well as revolutionaries of every kind, believed they were ushering in the various Third Reichs, marking the beginning of the supreme and final phase of history. Messianism, which has frequently accompanied eschatological and apocalyptic expectations, has assumed various secular forms in later period of modern age, particularly nationalism and political ideologies of powers imposing their concept of happiness and salvation on the world. We, who lived for decades in the shadow of the Tower of Babel, or one particular political form of messianism, the Marxist attempt at immanentization, the eschaton, have rich experience of it. The significance of negative apophatic theology does not reside solely in its perception that the only thing we can only say about God is what He is not, but rather in its view of what God is not, in its desacralization of what often purports to be God. Intimately bound up with negative theology are critical political theology and theological critic of political religions. This is even more true of negative eschatology, which we can thus regard as a part and maybe even the heart of negative theology. Implicit in negative eschatology is a critic of political utopias that seek to sacrifice the present and entire generations to the new beautiful world promised by revolutionaries. God, as the future, does not demand revolutionary violence and its bloody victims. Only false gods feed on blood. Negative eschatology also embodies a critic of false satisfaction. No state of society or of the church can purport to be its final and definitive state as a paradise that requires no further reform and development and which refuses to accept any criticism. The Catholic Church long ago rejected the millenaristic ideology as heresy, and in its definition of the Church, the Second Vatican Council returned to the image used to characterize the people of the original covenant, the people of God on a journey through history, communio viatorum. It is not the first time, of course, that Christians borrowed concepts and images from Jewish tradition in order to define themselves. That tradition is understandably so familiar to us that we regard it as part of our own identity. However, history has demonstrated that a great risk inherent in that familiarity. Until quite recently, Christians imagined, and I fear that many of them still do, that they were given the task of replacing and substituting for Israel. It was not until they were confronted with the tragedy of the Holocaust or Shoah that many Christians realized that the fruit of this dangerous theory of substitution was the indifference of many Christians toward Nazis' attempt to implement with absurd consequences the notion that Jews have no place here anymore. Radical Islamists and radical secularists alike regard Christianity in the same that Christians regarded Judaism. For radical Muslims, Christianity was simply lower stage of the religion of the last prophet. While for the radical secularism, Christianity, along with all other religions, is simply an infantile phase on the path to adult atheistic humanism. Islam and atheism also started to read and interpret our sacred texts differently from the way we read and interpret them, rather in the way that Christians were convinced that only their interpretation of the Hebrew Bible was right, and then Jews had a false understanding of their own sacred texts. The portals of medieval churches were often adorned with a statue of a blindfolded woman representing the synagogue. Likewise, certain radical Muslim extremists and certain section of militant atheism have come to the conclusion that Christianity has no longer any place in our world. It is now the sacred duty of Christians to proclaim that the house of the common Father of all people, both in heaven and on earth, has many mansions, and that all of us, Christians, Jews, Muslims, advocates of secular humanism, and many other spiritual paths, have their place here and the right to seek freely their path to the truth. We profess Jesus, who said himself, "I am the way." We believe that he is the Alpha and Omega of the Church's journey, and the Church is his mysterious body. Nevertheless, the Apostle reminds us that in the body and in this world we have by no means reached our goal. We are all sinners and fall short of the glory of God. We relate our goal through faith, hope, and love. These are the three forms of eschatological patience. The mission of negative eschatology is to uphold the openness of the human world vis-à-vis the absolute mystery, which defies human capacities and which human beings can only relate it through patient faith, hope, and love. An important expression of that patience is the persistent rejection of the temptation of religious triumphalism, particularly its attempts to turn faith into a closed ideological system and believers into possessors of the truth. What this means for Christianity was precisely spelled out by the Croatian Protestant theologian Miroslav Volf, now at Yale University. Believing in Jesus Christ, who is the witness to the truth and embodies the fullness of the truth, means acknowledging that we are not Jesus Christ, that we are not self-denying witnesses of the truth, and hence not its possessors either. Nonetheless, to abdicate the search for truth would be to consent to a world in which only the most powerful have the right to decide. Truth is a shield against the violence that the powerful inflict on the weak. Miroslav Volf has written, and he went on to say, however, if this shield is not to be transformed into deadly weapon, it must be in the hands of those who renounce violence. Devotion to truth must go hand in hand with devotion to non-violence. Otherwise, devotion to truth will itself become a source of violence. So, the Miroslav Volf. If we Christians are a communio viatorum, a pilgrim community, then we must learn to respect and show solidarity to all other pilgrims and renounce all forms of violence and haughtiness toward them. However, our belief in one God, who is the absolute mystery of the eschatological future, also tell us that those who believe in other religions are also only pilgrims. If we realize that we are all pilgrims, we need not allow ourselves to be enhurried, to be fascinated by the ideas of others, and we must not be uncritical towards them. They also have not reached their goal, and we have the right and duty to remind not only ourselves of the fact, but also them. Today, I have been talking about negative eschatology, about the need to disencumber of our eschatological hope of the burden of triumphalism and excessively human projection of our fears and wishes. However, I would like to add and stress that the heart of Christian eschatology is trust in mystery, the mystery of the tremendous generosity of God's love. In that respect, we would also call negative eschatology mystical eschatology. None of us is perfect. Just how far our world is from our notions of a perfect world, even indeed from a slightly more bearable world, often fill us with fear and dread. Everything will pass away, says the apostle, but love will never pass away. So, love is perhaps the only thing that is worth striving to perfect. Perfect love casts our fear. Thank you.
Thank you very, very much, Professor Halik. You will take some questions, I think, now?
Yes, of course.
A few, and then we will adjourn to outside of this.
Thank you very much. That was both stimulating and inspiring. As you know, we share deep similarities in our understanding of theology and eschatology. I'm interested in addressing a question to you as much as a pastor, as much as a theologian. Because one of the difficult issues that I think the church has to face is the question of what practices to put into place in order to cultivate the forms of love and nonviolence that you are advocating. Early on in the address, you had this beautiful phrase, part of the problem is that we fail to make friends of our doubts, so we project them onto the other. But since so much of Christian history is replete with the rejection of doubt and a certain kind of affirmation of confidence, it's not only an intellectual task, it's a practical task. What are the practices that we need to begin to develop in order for this vision that you have of a loving, nonviolent people to actually come into existence?
I remember some of my personal experiences. I think that to put in the practice, we must discuss, especially with the young people. One of my formative moment in my life was in 1969 when I was 21. It was just after the Soviet occupation and before the border were closed for another 20 years. I was allowed to go to a summer seminary which was organized by the British Quakers. And then people from many countries, from many continents, of many religions, of many political preferences. And we discuss it from early morning to the late evening, the global issues, justice and peace and all these things. This discussion didn't change the course of the history, but it has changed my worldview, because I realize that I have learned to look at the world through the eyes of the others, and to realize that the otherness of the other could be also enrichment. So I think in this dialogue with the others, if we are young, if we are in the phase that we have known the close mind, and perhaps it is not the question of age, but so it is perhaps one of the practical experience. And then to go with the people through their spiritual crisis. I think that in every human story, of every human path of belief, there are some dark nights of the soul. And I think there are also this collective dark nights of the soul, and it was this 20th century. And to show the people that these dark nights are a great opportunity to go deeper and deeper. And to be challenged by this silence of God is also a great experience. I always say people that is a very important religious experience, the prayer which was not fulfilled. Because if the prayer is fulfilled, then the God that we imagine God as an automat, and we can put there our coins of our wishes and then order what should be, and if it will be not fulfilled, we say there is no God. So to nobody we will do it, to our friends, to our partners, and so on. But we can do it to our God. And if our prayers are not fulfilled, so we can imagine that God has His freedom, and that the religion and the faith is mainly the way how to stand up toward the mystery. Not to have the key to all problems, and also this eschatological openness of our faith and our past. I think it's very important, and it is the differentiation between the deistic trust in God behind the scene, which many people think it is Christianity. And the Christian theology begins when we have some experience with the cross, with this Good Friday, and also it's my dialogue with the non-believers. Some atheists, they've got this atheism, not this scientific atheism and so on, but this atheism of sorrow. I only say yes, you participate on this Good Friday experience, and it is a part of our experience as well. It is a part of our crucial story of our gospel. And only I can say that the story does not end with the afternoon of the Good Friday. It's going on, but we must be patient. That's this. Yes, please.
Thank you, Professor Halik. One of the things you said in the beginning was that we don't have a language, suitable language of communication, of dialogue. And you suggested love. But I wondered I think even love gets theological. So the message of love, the language of love is also embedded in particular theologies. How do you disembed it when you're communicating?
Yeah, I try to say in my lecture that I don't think just to quote that by that I don't mean the sweetly sentimental talk of love, but a form of communication that would have the attributes of St. Paul ascribed to love. Love is patient, love is kind, love is not envious, not boastful, not arrogant or rude. It does not insist on its own way, it is not irritable or resentful, it does not rejoice in wrongdoing, but rejoices in the truth. It bears all things, believes all things, hopes all things, endures all things. I think this, it endures all things. This patience, this patience to stay with the others in their crisis, in their questions, in their doubts. It is the important way, and also it is not an arrogant language, but I think for the life of Christian faith, it is important to live the life of dialogue, to learn to listen, and then to answer. And in the pastoral work, sometimes the pastor say, and now we will put ourselves the question, and he put himself the question which nobody asked. It is the question he knows the answer already. But I think we must patiently to listen the real question of people. It was also the method of Paul Tillich. He always said that in the culture, in the literature, in the art, they are the questions for the sense of life, and they are the questions for God, and we must find the dialogical way how to explain the gospel as an answer to these questions. It's my experience from my country that when some evangelical missionaries came, and they have this little bit militant way of missionary work, it's counterproductive, because in the post-communist world, people are allergic to an indoctrination, and evangelization without inculturation is just an indoctrination. And inculturation, it means try to understand the mentality of the people, the culture, and the way they are thinking, and the way of their lifestyle and style of thinking, and to translate the message into this language. So, say this, yes, please. Who was the first? Here.
Professor, what role, if any, do you see for social action? Believers, people of belief, or working with non-believers to address social inequalities in interfaith dialogue or negative eschatology?
I'm not sure if the social, if this is the way. I think there must be some social equality is a problem, but there must be the human equality, the equality of the human persons, and also the presumption that that the religion of the others is at least subjective in their personal way, honest. And that the fullness of truth is the eschatological hope. So that we are pilgrims, as I try to say. So that this action, this equality is the equality of the pilgrims. And of course, it's very important to have our own identity. Also, when the Dalai Lama, he will come here, and I met him many times, and I admired also his sentence. I'm not coming to make you Buddhist, but I'm coming with the appeal to take serious your own religion. So I think this respect to the otherness of the other is very important. And of course there is the social level of the interfaith dialogue is also very important. So there are several levels. There's the level of the doctrine, of the theological level. It's very difficult, because our theology and our doctrine is has been formatting in the different philosophical context and in a different language and concept and so on. They are misunderstandings and also tensions. There is another level, the level of the mysticism, of the mystical experience. It's a deeper level, and there is a greater chance to communicate and to share the experiences. But there is also the practical level. We can cure of the the solidarity with the poor, to struggle for the peace, for the human rights, and in many religions are similar ethical challenges and demands. So this practical cooperance, this practical attempts to cultivate the creation, the nature, and to cultivate this human rights, respecting human rights, and so on. It's the practical way, of course, and there are already many initiatives to cooperate on this social level, or the practical, the political level, if you want.
Let's take one more question.
Thank you very much, Professor. I found it your talk very inspirational, and if I was in a position to do so, I would. So you have my vote for Pope, but for a host of reasons, my concern is that the message that I hear, for example, from the Vatican, as one example, is that in a number of different areas, the message seems to be coming down that you must believe as I believe, for example, in the role of women, the issues of abortion, the issues of homosexuality and so forth, that it's not just within the religion, but everybody, regardless of religion, must believe in this particular way. How do you address that? How do you resolve those, what appears to be that message?
So it's not only a problem of the Vatican. I think it's a problem of many religions, so everybody who has its own religious identity thinks I accept my religion because it is truth and it is normal. But the problem is if it is the holy and the only truth, and if there is some differentiation between the truth as we acknowledge and we discover it in this historical moment, and between the fullness of truth, which is this eschatological task. So I think that this is the real problem, and if I would be able to answer your question, I would be not only Pope, but perhaps the Nobel Prize winner for peace. Nobody is able to answer your question fully, because it's a real problem in the world. And I'm afraid that sometimes the interreligious dialogue is the question of the conferences of specialists, and sometimes we create a special subculture and we understand each other better than the people on our own basis. So I know all these conferences and we know each other, and we always know that the others are nice people, and we can read our text and communicate through all these technical instruments we have, and but then we create a little bit a special religion of the dialogue, and we have less possibilities to influence the people on the basis. So I try to understand the psychological roots of this fundamentalism, fanaticism, and so on. And also I believe in this sharing the experience of the young people, as I told you, just in this discussion. So I think it's perhaps the only way. Yes, there are so many conflicts in this world, and the power of religion is so misused. You know, I love this wonderful Hasidic story. The Rabbi Pinkas asked the students, when is the moment when the night ends and the morning comes? And one of the people say, "Oh, it's the moment when we are able to discover what is the difference between the fig tree and the other tree." And so, no, it is not this moment. And the other said, "Oh, it's the moment when we can recognize the sheep from a dog." And so, no, it is not. And so say, "Oh, when is this moment when the night ends and the morning comes?" And the rabbi said, "It is the moment when you are able to look to the face of the others and to recognize in them your brother and sister, until there is still night." And I'm afraid there is still night in many hours and minds, in many human hearts and minds. There are still much darkness, but the gatherings like here are also a spark of hope, and we must challenge, we must not be afraid, and to put some light of hope in these darknesses of our world. Thank you.
Please join me.